Nikki, you left your shoes here.
No, those are Darren's.
Darren,
You can keep.
Pleasure. Thank you for letting me be with you.
Thank you for coming.
you want some water, a hot tea or something?
No, I'm satiated. Thank you.
Darren, are we on?
You're on.
Okay. So welcome to the Tibet Center. We start with some prayers. And okay, thank you. We'll start with the prayer for the spreading of the teachings throughout the length and breadth of the West. By the force of the blessings of the non-fallacious three precious gems, and of the truth of our pure selfless wishes, may the precious Buddhist teachings flourish and spread to the expanse of all areas throughout the length and breadth of the West. For all the people living there together with their near ones, who have engaged in the teachings and have faith and respect for them, may all conditions adverse to their practice of the pure Dharma be dispelled, and an excellent collection of favorable conditions increase like the waxing moon. And especially for those who work on methods to accomplish the flourishing and spreading of the victorious one's teachings, which are the source of benefit and happiness, may they never be oppressed by masses of interference and adverse conditions, and may this spontaneously happen just as we have hoped and wished. Now the Heart Sutra. Thus have I heard once. The Blessed One was dwelling in the royal domain of the Vulture Peak Mountain, together with a big gathering of great monks and great bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the Samadhi, which examines the Dharmas called profound illumination, and at the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, looking at the profound practice of transcendent knowledge, saw the five skandhas in their natural emptiness. Then, through the inspiration of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to Avalokiteshvara, how should those of noble practice of transcendent knowledge? And Avalokiteshvara answered, Venerable Shariputra, whoever wishes to follow the profound practice of transcendent knowledge should look at it like this, seeing the five skandhas in their natural emptiness. Form is empty, emptiness itself is form. Emptiness is not separate from form. Form is not separate from emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discriminating awareness, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Thus all the dharmas are empty and have no characteristics. They are unborn and unceasing. They are not impure or pure. They neither decrease nor increase. Therefore, since there is emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discriminating awareness, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no sensation, no objects of mind, no quality of sight, no quality of hearing, no quality of smelling, no quality of tasting, no quality of sensing, no quality of thought, no quality of mind consciousness. There are no nidanas from ignorance to old age and death, nor their wearing out. There is no suffering, no cause of suffering, no ending of suffering, and no path, no wisdom, no attainment, no non-attainment. Therefore, since there is no attainment, the bodhisattvas abide by means of transcendent knowledge. And since there is no obscurity of mind, they have no fear. They transcend falsity and pass beyond the bounds of sorrow. All the Buddhas who dwell in the past, present, and future, by means of transcendent knowledge, fully and clearly awaken to unsurpassed, true, complete enlightenment. Therefore, the mantra of transcendent knowledge, the mantra of deep insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequaled mantra, the mantra which calms all suffering should be the proof, for there is no deception. In transcendent knowledge, the mantra is proclaimed. Tadyata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasamgate Bodhiswaha. O Shariputra, this is how a Bodhisattva Mahasattva should learn profound transcendent knowledge. Then the Buddha, from that Samadhi and praised the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Avalokiteshvara, saying, Good, good, O son of should be done just as we are taught, and Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One said this, Shariputra and Avalokiteshvara, that whole gods, humans, asuras, and Gandharvas, their hearts full of joy, praise the words of the Blessed One. And now we generate bodhicitta. With the mind, with the wish to free all beings, I shall always go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha until I reach full enlightenment. Inspired by wisdom and compassion, today in the Buddha's presence, I generate the mind of full enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. As long as space endures, as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. With the wish to free all beings, I shall always go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha until I reach full enlightenment. Inspired by wisdom and compassion, today in the Buddha's presence, I generate the mind intent on full awakening for the benefit of all sentient beings. As long as space endures, as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. With the wish to free all beings, I shall always go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha until I reach full enlightenment. Inspired by wisdom and compassion, today in the Buddha's presence, I generate the mind of intent on full awakening for the benefit of all sentient beings. As long as space endures, as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I too remain to dispel the miseries of the world. Okay. So today is the 4th day of the 6th month of the Tibetan calendar. And what's interesting is that yesterday was the 4th day of the 6th month of the Tibetan calendar. There are 2 4th days of the 6th month. And the 4th day of the 6th month of the Tibetan calendar is the anniversary of the Buddha's first teaching. It's called the first turning of the wheel of Dharma. And so we celebrate the first teaching of the Buddha twice this year. And today is also the birthday of Trungla Rinpoche, who was born in Tibet on the 4th day of the 6th month. So whether he was born yesterday or today...
Maybe he was born twice.
So he was born many times, actually.
Redundancy is very important.
So, happy birthday to Trungla Rinpoche. And so the story of the Buddha's first teaching is, I'm sure most of you know it, the crowds out there who are...
I have a loudspeaker system because they can't all fit in here. So I have to take care of it. It's on me.
Most, of course, know the story, but when the Buddha attained enlightenment, and he had this, he had been meditating with his little gang of 5 ascetics who were, what is the word, sort of starving themselves to the point they didn't want to in any way indulge in any kind of sensual pleasure or satisfaction, so they didn't even eat. And there is here a statue of the Buddha where you can actually see the veins, you see the ribs, and this is from before he attained enlightenment, as he was practicing these austerity practices. And at some point he had he did this for 6 years, and at some point he had the realization that he wasn't actually advancing towards any insights. He was starving. And so he, when he had this realization, a woman came up to him and offered him food. She offered him this milk that had been boiled and boiled and boiled and boiled, and he took this. Some say it's kheer. It's rice and milk boiled and boiled. Some say it's just the milk. Anyway, he took this and immediately had vitality. And with the vitality that he had, he went and he sat under a tree and was determined to remain there until he realized the ultimate truth. And he sat under the tree, and by dawn he had suddenly attained the enlightenment of Buddhahood, the omniscient state of a Buddha. And with that enlightenment, he realized that there was no one able to understand what he had just experienced, what had been revealed. And he wandered for a few weeks, and he made his way to Varanasi and off the banks of the Ganges. And there he came across the five ascetics with whom he had been practicing. And they were determined not to in any way acknowledge his existence, let alone show him any respect, because he had left their ascetic ways. But he glowed. His enlightenment was apparent to them. And they were so amazed by it that they automatically stood and showed him respect and asked him to tell them what it was that he had realized. And so he taught them. And that's the first teaching. That is what we're celebrating today, the first turning of the wheel of Dharma. So in Sarnath, right on the edge of Varanasi, he taught the Four Noble Truths, the truth of suffering, the truth that we are in the state, that our natural state is one of suffering, the true cause of suffering, and then due to the fact that suffering is caused, the third noble truth is the true cessation, which is that if you don't have a cause, you won't have a result. So if you remove the cause of suffering, you can bring about a cessation of suffering. And then he taught the true path to the cessation that removes suffering. So that was his first teaching. So that's what we're celebrating today. So happy suffering, happy cause of suffering, happy cessation of suffering in particular. And here we are actually devoting ourselves to the path leading to the cessation of suffering.
Can you talk a little about what the Buddhists mean by suffering? Do you think it's appropriate, or if you don't want to do that?
So, well, this, by the way, is as much a discussion as it is a lecture, and so chime in. All right, Tony, you talk about what is meant by suffering.
Talk about what is meant by this.
Yeah.
State of dissatisfaction. And there are three levels of it. First, the parent suffering. Even animals know that. Pain in the neck. And then what they call the suffering of change, which is really running after pleasures. Because they change. They don't last. And then you're upset that you don't have it. And then you crave it. And then there's pervasive suffering, the conditions that brought us into this life, or karma and delusion, a false view of reality. And as long as we have that pervasive suffering, we don't attain the end of samsara and eventually Buddhahood. The end of samsara means state of constant changing of different levels, high and low, animal, hell being, God, Buddha. That's it. That's my turn paper for today.
So, the most important quality of suffering that we have to work at recognizing is the all-pervasive suffering. Is as long as we cling to a sense of self, we work toward that clinging, that grasping at a sense of self, out of which comes our self-cherishing, our selfishness, our wish to satisfy ourselves, our wish to protect ourselves from anything that challenges our happiness. All of those, let's say, attitudes that all stem out of this holding on to a sense of self, which is that all-pervasive, which the Buddha calls suffering. And these different sort of layers, or these different aspects of suffering, we can really identify with. And you know, a practitioner would sit and think about how, as we go through life, yes, there are those things that hurt us, those things that cause us what we call suffering, dissatisfaction. All of those exist. That they're easy to recognize. And actually, when we go about trying to get rid of our suffering, we usually simply aim our attention at those forms of suffering. What we're really trying to reduce is that sort of gross suffering that we can identify as suffering. The second one, the suffering of change, that one is a little, we tend to envy when we see others who are experiencing that sort of, the good things in life. We don't view those good things, or that experience of the good things in life, we don't view that as being a state that we should feel sorry for or have compassion towards. On the contrary, we view it that we envy. And there, the practitioners should really come to recognize that all of those wonderful states of being that people are experiencing will come to an end, and they will eventually experience suffering. When the good karma, the virtuous past actions that have caused them to experience happiness are exhausted, they're going to suffer. And we the example that's often given in the books is you're cold, and you go into a warm situation and you think, this is wonderful, and then you start to get hot, and you want to take off your sweater, and you want to, or you walk into here, and it's hot out there, and you think, how nice, and then you think, I'm cold, and does anyone have a shawl? I hear this often. Sorry?
Yes, that we hear that all the time from men gallantly.
So those forms of suffering we can relate to easily. That third one is the tricky one. That third one is the important one. And if we really can recognize that all-pervasive quality of suffering, that clinging to a sense of self is the cause of the other forms of suffering, and that it accompanies us always, and it accompanies all sentient beings. So these three forms of suffering, of course, we have to identify them in ourselves, but we really have to work towards recognizing that each and every sentient being is experiencing that. Buddy, for example, is he here?
He's in front of you.
Oh, so is he lying there happily?
Lying there.
Yeah, he has a little bit of a strange look on his face, like.
When do we eat? Yes.
So now he's maybe experiencing the suffering of change. So but when he starts to get hungry, he's going to be experiencing the suffering of suffering. I'm rather strict. He's so overweight that I'm trying to.
But not
He's
fully
much
there.
better. Much better. He has a lot of hair too, so it's hard to tell.
he's heavy. So suffering of suffering of change. But what causes the fact that he's a cat and that he's in this situation is really due to, or is the suffering, the all-pervasive suffering.
And all-pervasive suffering is like, I'm trying to grasp exactly what it is again. That's the suffering of kind of realizing that reality is one thing and your projections are another, maybe? Is that what it is?
So, it pervades all in the sense that we are all clinging to a sense of self. We are all we all possess this feeling of me. If we look for that self that we cling to, and that clinging, that grasping is what causes us to engage in actions that then cause us to suffer in the sort of grosser ways. But that if we look for the self that we are holding on to, we'll find that there is no self. There is no. If we look among the physical parts and the mental parts of ourselves, we're not going to find a core me. Well, if we take this book, we look for the core book. We take each part of the book. This is not the core. We get to the end and there's no book. In the same way, if we go through all the parts of me, we'll find that there's no me. And that's a sort of extraordinary thing to realize, that just in the same way that among the parts that make up a book, you won't find a book. If you look at the parts that make me up, you'll find that there's no me. Even the sort of subtle consciousness that we feel is sort of the essential me, even that is a part. This is my hand, but it's also me. That's my consciousness, but it's also me. So the actual me is an idea imputed on all these parts. Holding that idea to be existent is the basis for then wishing to satisfy that me and engaging in the actions.
All-pervasive, that kind of, yeah, okay, got it, understood.
So, those are the Four Noble Truths. We have been discussing, and we might as well continue with our discussion.
We'll share. Yeah.
You can, if you turn that, you'll have some light up there.
Might get a tan, be careful.
It's all right.
So, we've been discussing, for the crowds out there, we've been discussing
They're holding up
beyond
the books.
beyond religion, ethics for a whole page. So we're on 69.
You're right. Correct.
You're telling everyone outside that 69,
Not put the light on,
69,
that's a
69.
signal to sit down. You know,
Some people
think-
actually believe.
Yeah,
We
no,
do.
they can't see.
One friend said, wow, so many people.
Oh, yeah.
So, I shouldn't have said that. Actually, there are many.
You should at least nod in acknowledgement.
So,
All right.
we've been talking about forgiveness, and yesterday we were talking about the whole idea of whether we have the power to forgive or not was where we started. And there are those who consider that if someone has engaged in some kind of non-virtuous action, some kind of sin, let's call it, it's a sort of difficult word, but we don't really have the ability to absolve them of that action, mental action, whatever the action is. What is that sound?
Bird?
What, is that Tenzin's phone?
No, it's a bird.
The bird? It's not a bird. It's a pretty talented bird.
So, forgiveness. Do we have the power to forgive or not? And as I had mentioned, I was invited to some conference, and there were people from different religions, and the predominant attitude was that if someone commits some kind of non-virtuous action, we do not have the ability to truly forgive them. It was, what is the name of the Nobel Peace Laureate? Elie Wiesel, who had been asked by one of the guards in the concentration camp who was dying of cancer, had summoned Wiesel and had asked him for forgiveness. And Wiesel said, I can't do that. I don't have the power to forgive you. So at the conference, that was sort of the basis. Do we have the power to forgive or not? And I think that from a spiritual practitioner's point of view, I have the power to from my side, have an attitude of forgiveness, to really not only do I have the power to forgive, I have the, let's say, moral obligation to work towards forgiving, to work to that. I think that's an aim that I should really assume as a practitioner. And one of the ways that one can do that is if we truly believe in the laws of karma, the laws of cause and effect, if we really consider the laws of karma, we have to acknowledge that any difficulty that I experience is the result of my own non-virtuous actions. And so it is my own fault, as it were. It is due to my past actions that I'm experiencing the difficulty that I'm experiencing. Now, this is not something where we are judging others who are experiencing suffering, saying they are suffering because they committed non-virtues in the past. No, this is something we apply to ourselves. And it's sort of the basis of it. I think that in some ways we could consider it to be the basis of a real spiritual grounding. Real spiritual understanding has to come from an acknowledgement that I am responsible for the situation that I am in, that every bit of difficulty that I encounter is something that I am responsible for. And if I wish to work towards happiness, I have to work at causing that happiness, which is engaging in the karma, in the virtuous karma that brings about happiness. This is something that we do all by ourselves. As I say, we're not working at judging others. We're working at judging ourselves, and we're working at let's say, straightening out our own moral behavior, acknowledging the responsibility that we have for where we are, and exerting or putting effort into the actions that will bring about our happiness. And how do we bring about our happiness? the most powerful positive karmic actions are the ones that are the most selfless, the ones that are most devoted to helping others. The most powerful non-virtuous actions are selfish actions. The line, I think that I keep using this word spiritual. I don't know that that's sort of correct, but I'll do it again. The spiritual line between virtuous and non-virtuous is whether an action is engaged in out of selfishness or whether it is engaged in out of selflessness. And if the reason I said that the sort of basis, the ground of spiritual work is based on our acceptance of the laws of karma, that the acceptance of the laws of karma is an acceptance of the fact that non-virtue is selfish, that virtue is selfless, and we are working at diminishing the non-virtue, and we're working at augmenting our virtuous tendencies. That's I think what the spiritual path is all about. And it can be applied, we have these ideas of what virtuous actions should be, that they are, giving, working as a doctor, working in a hospital, working in that those are the signs of virtuous behavior. No, I think that it's not a question of the physical action. It's a question of the motivation with which we do whatever we do. And you can be a waiter in a restaurant and you can go about your task really wishing to please people and really being as selfless as possible and really engaging in the service of waiting in a way to bring pleasure to others. You can also be a waiter who's really rude and selfish and the same job. And even when I said rude, that was maybe wrong. Your attitude could be, inside could be rude. Your actions, your physical actions could be the same, but if your motivation is merely selfish or self-serving or in any way negative, then that same act is non-virtuous. If you are doing this with a real selfless wish to please the other person, then it has a pure virtuous quality. What's more, if when you are giving, you have the wish, oh, here I'm giving this person a salad or a bowl of soup or whatever, I wish I could be alleviating the suffering, the famine throughout existence. And you give with that thought, even if it's just for a moment, but if you have that thought, suddenly this simple act of, you're a waiter in a restaurant and you're giving the person their salad, becomes wonderful. It becomes great. So you they're selfish as opposed to non-selfish is far more subtle than the sort of gross then it's really the motivation, and motivation has different levels. Come sit down.
Sit down.
So, virtuous actions, as opposed to non-virtuous actions, are not sort of easily identified. It's your motivation. It's the attitude with which you engage in it. And giving to a beggar can be done with pride and arrogance. It can be done with a real wish to alleviate that person's difficulties. It can be done with a wish that one could alleviate all difficulties, and it can be done. The purest form of giving is done with an understanding that giving is empty of any inherent existence, that giving is dependent on a giver, the person whom you're giving to, and the gift. And if you can see that the giving has no intrinsic existence, but is a dependent arising, that brings a whole other quality of wisdom to the act of giving. So that, along with this wish to be able to provide for all, and with no pride, with a real sort of pure intention that's towards the other rather than yourself, that simple act of giving a dollar bill to a beggar can have enormous virtuous qualities. I think making music has the same potential.
Yeah, I enjoy it. So the thing is not the outer material thing, it's the internal motivation, and that's the thing that creates good situations in the future. That's what we should emphasize.
Right, so if I give I give on the outside, it looks like I'm giving a dollar bill, but my thoughts are bad, my intention is bad. It's not the same
I
as
know.
having a pure motive.
So
Yeah,
I don't know
there's
whether
degrees of
if you give the dollar bill
And then resentment.
and have a resentment, whether there's a tiny little bit of virtue in the giving. I think there is.
Yeah. It's better than not giving and resenting.
Yeah.
Giving and resenting, but giving and not resenting is ideal.
There's some story of someone who attained enlightenment, and there was no basis for it, and no one understood what it was that had permitted this person to have the virtue to turn his situation around. And in some past life, he had been a bug that fell on a sort of lump of dung that circumambulated in water on a river or something, circumambulated some little island on which there was a holy image of the Buddha or a stupa or something, and that little virtuous circumambulation, totally unintended, provided some little spark
so he
of.
could become a monk.
Was that what it was?
Yeah, Buddha. Only one who
Oh,
knew
that's
that
right,
he had
yeah.
merit was Buddha. And Buddha said, many eons ago he was floating around,
Yes.
and then since he was in the presence of the Buddha, he became enlightened. Not instantly, but
Eventually.
watch where you step.
So.
That story, I don't know why.
So we were talking about forgiveness, and in light of forgiveness, which is what this chapter is on, the forgiveness, the most important form of forgiveness that we have to really work towards is forgiving. We'll call it forgiving ourselves. And I envy the Catholics because they have a very good system of being able to sort of clean up your negative actions. Ours is a little more difficult. We have to, I'm sure my Catholic friends are going to say to me, no, you have it all wrong. And I'm sure I do. However, the real confession that we have to make in working towards forgiveness is a confession that we make to ourselves. And it starts with the recognition that we have engaged in some kind of non-virtue, and the regret for having done so. But so I think that the word, it's not that we're forgiving ourselves, it's that we're taking the concept of forgiveness and we are applying the person whom we really have to judge, the person whom we really have to work on in terms of the sort of applying morality is ourselves. And I think we have a long way to go before we can actually forgive ourselves. I think that we have to really work at, again, I think it's sort of a core spiritual practice, work at recognizing the degree to which we behave selfishly, work at the degree to which we behave in ways that are based on cherishing ourselves. And we do it intuitively, we do it naturally, we do it, there's a certain amount of self-preservation that's automatic. But out of that automatic self-preservation, or as a result of it, comes a lot of self-indulgence, comes a lot of self-satisfaction, we sort of justify it. And I think that in our society today, there is more and more feeling that justification is justified. And I don't mean to judge or sort of morally judge the way in which people behave. What we're working at is morally judging ourselves, and work at diminishing our tendency to feel justified in satisfying ourselves or acting on sort of selfish impulse, and really work towards being of benefit beyond ourselves. And it's, again, I say, it's not a question of going out there and feeding all the poor and starving people. It's a question of changing our attitude. It's a question of analyzing and seeing the degree to which we do tend to work at satisfying our self-cherishing tendency, and work towards developing our concern for others. That's I think, again, sort of the essential spiritual work. It's working at diminishing the negative karmic way and working at developing the positive. And this is something that we would do in the morning when we wake up. We set our motivation. We work at determining that we're going to devote our efforts in this day towards being of some benefit to others, towards developing our motivation to have whatever we do be of benefit to others, and that we are going to work towards trying to refrain from engaging in selfish actions, engage in actions that are harmful to others, that can hurt others, that we determine to exert that muscle. And as we all know, it's very hard to exert that muscle when we are confronted with someone or something that challenges us, challenges our sense of how things should be. It's a muscle that we have to develop in meditation, or sitting and thinking about it, recognizing the ugliness, the negative aspect of that self-cherishing instinctual attitude, and recognizing the benefit of its opposite, and determining to refrain from indulging the selfish, self-cherishing, and to work towards the selfless. And if we do that in the morning, we at least set the tone for the day. Of course, we're going to, when someone bumps us, we're going to react. When someone takes something that we're going to be challenged. But if we set the tone at the beginning of the day, we definitely have some basis for remembering, oh, maybe I'll shut up, or I'll swallow that, or I'll just accept it, or whatever. We'll have some basis for exerting some kind of effort. While and then at the end of the day, we review, and the better we are at it, the more we can really identify those places where we were self-indulgent, where we were selfish, where we got angry, whatever, and we regret, and we determine to work at diminishing that tendency. We determine to work towards going in the opposite direction when we find ourselves confronted. And we're going to fail over and over, but if we do this in the mornings and in the evenings, we are definitely improving. We are definitely, that is the sort of basic.
The bracket today.
Yeah, and it's sort of like doing your exercises. It develops. It slowly but steadily develops, and it's if at the end of our lives we have a little bit of, I'm not even talking about a few years. His Holiness the Dalai Lama often says, don't expect results in a few months after having practiced for a few months. But maybe if after a few years you look back and you see that you're a little less angry, you're a little more generous, you've made some improvement, that's good. Yeah. And so if we can actually at the end of our lives see that, or even if we don't notice it, but if we are a little bit calm, if we are able to accept difficulties, that's the result of this practice. And that's as good as we can expect. I mean, if at the end of our lives we are at peace, we are accepting, I think that when we're at the end of our lives, I'm sort of approaching, and so I'm thinking about these things differently than I would have when I was in my youth.
10 years old.
If we it would be very easy to get frustrated and angry and impatient as I'm less able to do the things that I could do with such ease a few years ago. If I can accept them peacefully, if I can accept them patiently, I'm happier.
It's life. You can't do anything.
And if I'm happier, maybe those around me will be a little happier too. So that's really. Sorry?
Please be very happy. Don't hesitate.
So I'm going to satisfy my thirst a little bit.
Is there a difference between like self-cherishing and self-esteem? Sometimes I think I get a little lost there.
So I think self-esteem is very important. We have to have confidence in order to accomplish any of this. And that's self-esteem. Losing your self-esteem is not spiritual practice. Losing your self-esteem is sort of like a depressed attitude towards things. No, we have to be, we have to have, there's one of the qualities, so bodhicitta is when assume responsibility towards helping all sentient beings, and we recognize that we're pretty inadequately equipped, and so we determine to work towards enlightenment to really be able to help. And one of the qualities that is necessary to attain that goal, to be able to help others, is joyous effort. What are the other words for joyous effort? Chandra, joyous effort is, there is joy in the effort that we are making in engaging in virtue. So that joy is important, and we have to do it with confidence. We have to engage. That's important.
Sometimes joyous perseverance.
Perseverance, yes. Perseverance alone, that no, it has to have joy in it to succeed. I'm sure it's true in music making. That joy is. I better not.
What about the joy in taking pictures?
Yes. Very important. Very important.
Of course.
So, what were the two you were saying?
I was just saying, like, between self-cherishing and self-esteem, I think sometimes I get a little lost where I think one is the other. Like my self-esteem can go down because I think I'm self-cherishing, or maybe my self-cherishing will go up because I think it's self-esteem. It gets a little confusing for me to be able to parse through which is which at times. And then I feel a little lost, where I can feel a little bit maybe depressed or lackluster because I think, well, maybe I'll do this. Oh, that's just me being self-cherishing. You know, like it gets a little bit confusing somehow. So I was just wondering, you know, yeah, I don't know what the line between them is, or maybe just figuring that is sometimes a challenge, I suppose, for me.
So yes, I think that self-esteem is something we need to succeed. Self-cherishing is selfishness. Self-cherishing is we have an actor on.
You can turn that up.
Yeah, I don't see where they become.
Like, for instance, if I was to say, like, I maybe I'll do this to help this person. And I think it's altruistic or it's helpful in some way. But then I maybe uncover that actually it's just for me to feel good about myself. And that it kind of leads back to self-cherishing. And then I have low self-esteem. It's like a domino effect.
So skip that last step.
Right.
You can say to yourself, oh, I did that for my own. But I think we have to acknowledge that virtually everything we do has a selfish motive. That we, even when we're being generous, even there's some little, there's a delight in having others appreciate. I find myself, if I'm giving a dollar to someone in the street, that I mean, I'll give, if the guy's asleep or something, I'll put it in his cup. But if he's not asleep, I'll sort of say hello or something, and I feel that I'm being nice. But there's probably also a wish, on some level, for the acknowledgement of the fact that this guy has come along and given me money. I want that. And that's, I think that that's like, what's it called? We're working on that. We have to identify it, we have to recognize it, and that's why instead of just saying, hey, here's your dollar, if I, in my heart, think, I wish, there are so many starving people, I wish I could give to everyone. Here I'm giving to this person, but that thought at that moment takes my mind off that wish for recognition, and
Yeah, right, it's the motivation behind it, yeah, the intention. I see. Right.
It's the realization that I can't feed everybody, but I'm doing what I can that's in front of me.
I understand.
so we'll move along a little bit in the book, and His Holiness talks about this. There was an Irishman called Richard Moore who, when he was a little child, was shot in the
Yeah.
eye.
Northern Ireland, yeah.
Yeah, and went blind. And he, instead of feeling anger towards the person who shot him, he actually developed forgiveness and went and found the guy. He was, in the British Army or something. So, for me, the power of forgiveness is strikingly apparent in the example of a man I consider a personal hero, Richard Moore. In 1972, at just 10 years old, Richard was completely blinded by a rubber bullet fired by a British soldier in Northern Ireland. The tragedy could have turned the boy into an angry and resentful man, but Richard never bore ill will, and he devoted his life to the positive cause of helping and protecting other vulnerable children around the world. In fact, he made it his business to find the man who had blinded him and tell him he was forgiven. The two men are now friends. What a marvelous example of the power of compassion and forgiveness. I think I've been present at an event where His Holiness and Richard Moore were both there, and His Holiness went up to Richard Moore, who was blind, and said hello, and Richard Moore was touching His Holiness's face, and you could see this friendship between these two people. Though we Tibetans have suffered a great deal, still, as people, we try to refrain from succumbing to any tendency for hostility and revenge. Even toward the Chinese communist soldiers responsible for atrocities against Tibetans, we try to maintain compassion. Sometimes this produces unexpected results. Recently, for example, I met the son of a Chinese cavalry officer who, as a member of the People's Liberation Army in the late 1950s, was involved in the persecution of Tibetans. The father, now old, had sent me a message through his son, offering regret and sincere apologies for his deeds. To hear this was most moving, yet I think that had there been hatred on my part, this incident would only have served to increase it. By not clinging to the past experiences of injustice, by consciously trying to develop compassion towards our Chinese brothers and sisters, we Tibetans avoid being stuck in the past and can maintain a sense of freedom. But this does not mean that we do not stand firm against the injustices we face. So, in answer to those who insist that justice rather than compassion should lie at the heart of any system of ethics, I suggest that in reality there is no conflict between the principle of justice and the practice of compassion and forgiveness. Indeed, in my understanding, the very concept of justice is itself based on compassion. Well, I think that's a good place to
Any names, Darren?
So we'll read the Sutra of the Recollection of the Noble Three Jewels.
For the good rebirth of those killed in everything that's going on. Yes.
I prostrate to the Omniscient One. Thus the Buddha, Bhagavat, Tathagata, Arhat, Samyak Sambuddha, the learned and virtuous one, the Sugata, the knower of the world, the charioteer and tamer of beings, the unsurpassable one, the teacher of devas and humans is the Buddha Bhagavat. The Tathagata is in accord with all merit. He does not waste the roots of virtue. He is completely ornamented with all patience. He is the basis of treasures of merit. He is adorned with the minor marks. He blossoms with the flowers of the major marks. His activity is timely and appropriate. Seeing him, he is without disharmony. He brings true joy to those who long with faith. His knowledge cannot be overpowered. His strengths cannot be challenged. He is the teacher of all ascension beings. He is the father of bodhisattvas. He is the king of noble ones. He is the guide of those who journey to the city of nirvana. He possesses immeasurable wisdom. His speech is completely pure. His melody is pleasing. One never has enough of seeing him. His form is incomparable. He's not stained by the realm of desire. He's not stained by the realm of form. He's not affected by the formless realm. He is completely liberated from suffering. He's completely and utterly liberated from the skandhas. He is not possessed with dhatus. His ayatanas are controlled. He has completely cut the knots. He is completely liberated from extreme torment. He is liberated from craving. He has crossed over the river. He is perfected in all the wisdoms. He abides in the wisdom of the Buddha Bhagavats who arise in the past, present, and future. He does not abide in nirvana. He abides in the ultimate perfection. He dwells on the bhumi where he sees all sentient beings. All these are the perfect virtues of the greatness of the Buddha Bhagavat. The holy Dharma is good at the beginning, good in the middle, and good at the end. Its meaning is excellent. Its words are excellent. It is uncorrupted. It is completely perfect and completely pure. It completely purifies. The Bhagavat teaches the Dharma well. It brings complete vision. It is free from sickness. It is always timely. It directs one further. Seeing it fulfills one's purpose. It brings discriminating insight for the wise. The Dharma which is taught by the Bhagavat is revealed properly in the Vinaya. It is renunciation. It causes one to arrive at perfect enlightenment. It is without contradiction. It is pithy. It is trustworthy and puts an end to the journey. As for the Sangha of the great Yana, they enter completely, they enter insightfully, they enter straightforwardly, they enter harmoniously, they are worthy of veneration with joined palms, they are worthy of receiving prostration, they are a field of glorious merit, they are completely capable of receiving all gifts, they are an object of generosity, they are a great object of complete generosity, the protector who possesses great kindness, the omniscient teacher, the basis of oceans of merit and virtue. I prostrate to the Tathagata, the pure that comes to freedom from passion, virtuous, liberated from the lower realms. This alone is the supreme ultimate truth. I prostrate to the Dharma, which is peace. Having been liberated, they show the path to liberation. They are fully dedicated to the disciplines, and they are a holy field of merit and possess virtue. I prostrate to the Sangha. I prostrate to the Buddha, the leader. I prostrate to the Dharma, the protector. I prostrate to the Sangha of the community. I prostrate respectfully always to these three. The Buddha's virtues are inconceivable. The Dharma's virtues are inconceivable. The Sangha's virtues are inconceivable. Having faith in these inconceivables, therefore, may they be born in completely pure love. So now let's recite the praise for a swift return of Trungpa Rinpoche. Exalted wisdom of all victors gathered in a drop, sole refuge manifest in the form of the one wearing saffron robes, Guru Lobsang Tuwang Dorje Chang. please bear witness here today that our prayers may be fulfilled. We beseech the great torch of doctrine, accomplishing from long ago the vast waves of aspirational prayers, Lord of speech of the Victor Losang's teachings, spread them to the ends of the earth by means of explanation and practice. Though holding the commitment, I will invite all beings to be my guests in unsurpassed great awakening, yet you have withdrawn the activities of form that serves the welfare of others. Is that worthy of the supreme among beings, the Bodhisattvas? Though impossible for you till cyclic existence end, to abandon your commitment to liberate all beings, we beseech the new son of Nirmanakaya to swiftly return from the realm of Dharmakaya, brought forth by Bodhicitta, drawn by 7 steeds. Having reached the far limits of scholarship, religious life, and goodness, please come swiftly as an unrivaled supreme emanation, full holder of the sage's teachings, and wish-fulfilling jewel. Return with the glory of Losang Tempe. Magnificent truth of the 3 precious jewels, Mahakala, Karmayana, and Sri Mati Devi, and the ocean of Dharma protectors, may you spontaneously fulfill our wishes, the swift blossoming of the nation.